In the heart of Canada lies a historical site that very few people know about, an abandoned Jewish colony that once was a thriving community of immigrants who came to the middle of nowhere to start a new life. It's called Edenbridge, and it's in the province of Saskatchewan. To get there, you have to drive 2.5 hours from Saskatoon, the closest main city. This colony doesn't even rely on a paved road. At some point, you have to turn onto a dirt road in order to get there. To find it, search on Google Maps for Bet Israel Synagogue, which is the monument that first greets you when you arrive. The synagogue is unlocked, so you can just open the latch and walk inside. If you're a male, then it's best if you wear a kippah, or any hat to cover your head, in order to respect the Jewish tradition in this historical synagogue. Walking into the space is a special experience. You'll have the place to yourself, as no one ever comes here. It's the only remaining standing structure on the site, and is in fact the oldest synagogue in Saskatchewan, built in 1908, just 2 years after the settlers arrived here. Upstairs is the women's gallery, where the women would have prayed. As per Jewish tradition, men and women have to be separated during prayer. The women's gallery also gives you a good view of the hall from above, so the women would have had the better view. This building was the fulcrum of the community throughout the 6 decades that they lived on this land. So who were these people, and where did they come from? Their story takes us back to Lithuania, at the beginning of the 20th century. Lithuania always had a large and strong Jewish community, but that period was not an easy time to be Jewish in Eastern Europe. Anti-Semitism was running high, and Jewish communities were often targets of pogroms, which were basically erratic bursts of anti-Semitic violence, where mobs of people would storm into Jewish neighborhoods, destroying property, beating, and killing, sometimes even aided by the authorities. This will be dwarfed by the horrors that befell the Jews just 4 decades later, but it was more than enough reason to leave at the time. And so a group of 56 Jews from Lithuania did just that, and hopped on a boat to South Africa. They didn't stay there long, however, because at some point a member of their group named Sam Vikar saw an ad in the newspaper about the Canadian government offering cheap land in the newly created province of Saskatchewan, which had just joined the Canadian Confederation in 1905. The government wanted to populate this land, and so they were offering cheap land as incentive to come settle. So these Jews hopped on a boat again and headed for this icy country. They arrived in 1906, and this was the plot of land they purchased. 160 acres, 800 meters by 800 meters, and guess how much they paid for it? $10, which, adjusting for inflation, is about 300 Canadian in today's value. 160 acres was the standard size of measuring fields back then, and it still is now, as you can tell by all the other fields around it. Just to give you scale, it would take you 10 minutes to walk across it, or 40 minutes all around it. Imagine getting all this land for just $300. That's dirt cheap. Literally. Today, it would cost you between $150,000 and $200,000 for the same plot of land. These settlers basically got it for free. But starting a farming community in one of the coldest winters in the world was a challenge so immense that it's a miracle they even made it happen. These weren't farmers originally, they were city dwellers from Europe, and so they had to learn everything from scratch, in one of the harshest climates in the world, and in one of the most isolated places one can possibly be in. Even today the place is isolated. Imagine what it was like 100 years ago. This must have felt like the edge of the world for them, because it was. In fact, they may not have made it if it wasn't for the help of the indigenous locals, who taught them how to build log houses, chink with clay and roof with sod, so they could survive the -40 winters. But they pushed through the immense difficulties, together as a solid community, and made this dream happen. They would have written letters to their community back home, telling them about this amazing opportunity of cheap land. And so other families joined them later, and they purchased more and more fields around the area. Together with the arrival of more families, and people marrying and having kids, these original 56 individuals eventually became a community of 50 families, 170 people, at the peak of the colony in the 1920s. The Canadian Jewish Archive sent me the surveyor's map of the colony. It doesn't have a date on it, but I believe it's from that period in the 20s, when they were at their peak. The map is not oriented north for some reason, so I reoriented it and matched it to fit exactly on top of today's Google map. You can see that the river meandered and changed its course somewhat in these 100 years, as rivers do. If you zoom in on the original core field, you can see that the surveyor himself marked the synagogue with the Star of David, and also wrote the names of the families that owned each field. I then took every field that was owned by them and marked it on today's Google map. The borders are exactly the same as they were 100 years ago, so it was easy to do. And when I took away the surveyor's map, it showed more clearly how far they expanded. The blue fields were fully owned debt-free. The yellow ones lent out for trial periods, and the green ones mortgaged, I guess because they were more expensive. The surveyor's map also indicated 3 schools, here, here, and here, as well as a Jewish community hall. But these are all gone now. These pioneers really came a long way, and became a successful farming community. They grew wheat, barley, and oats, as well as livestock. With tenacity and determination, they made something out of themselves. And they built this beautiful synagogue. Also interesting is that they actually named Edenbridge because they originally wanted to call it Jewtown, and that was not a name that the government really liked. So then they came up with the name Edenbridge because that is sort of the English version of Edenbridge, Yidden meaning Jewish. So Edenbridge, Jew bridge, and this is based on also the fact that there was a bridge here over the Carrot River, which is the local river. So Edenbridge to the government of Canada sounded more appealing because, you know, kind of like the Garden of Eden, but to them it was sort of a code name for the name that they wanted in the first place. From the synagogue, a beautiful path will take you to the cemetery. After the colony declined, all the land was sold, and a quarter of the original field was donated to the Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation in 1987. This is the organization that maintains the synagogue and cemetery today, which is why they're in good condition. 40 acres of undisturbed land to serve as a nature reserve and a heritage site. Going towards the cemetery, me and my friend saw a wild chicken. It never even occurred to me that there are still wild chickens. Clearly the project has been a success. This is a safe haven for wildlife, among a sea of monoculture that is Saskatchewan, Canada's largest agricultural region and one of the breadbaskets of the world. Arriving at the cemetery, you are greeted by this neat sign. The most beautiful time in my opinion to come visit this place is in the fall, when all the leaves turn yellow. This footage was from another time I came here. But this particular visit was during late August. The feeling in this place is very melancholic, especially in the evening. Seeing gravestones with Hebrew on them in the middle of nowhere is quite a unique sight to see. What's super interesting is that on the gravestones, I could see a lot of the same family names that appeared on the surveyor's map. It made history on paper become that much more real. And judging by the fact that most of these gravestones date from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, I could tell that these were the original pioneers. The very first ones who founded this place. From my research, I was able to gather 40 family names out of the 50 historical families of Edenbridge. If you happen to be a descendant and are watching this, or if you're connected to this place somehow, please write me a comment below the video, or send me an email. I would love to hear from you. And for everyone else watching, do you know of any fascinating Jewish heritage sites that are not well known? Write me a comment and tell me about it. Maybe I'll go there one day and make a video about it. And please subscribe to my channel. I'll be going to all sorts of interesting places in the future. It was getting dark at this point, and the mosquitoes were coming out and eating us alive. So me and my friend headed back towards the synagogue. And on the way back, we found these decayed houses that belonged to the pioneers, just on the next field over. The Great Depression took a heavy toll on the colony, just like it did for the rest of North America in the 1930s. On top of the economic depression, there was a decade-long drought that affected the Great Plains of the US and the Canadian prairies, which are actually the same geological region if you ignore the political border. Edenbridge slowly began to decline as a colony after the 30s. The continuous difficulty and hardship of farming on this land, modernization, the lure of urban centers like Saskatoon, Regina, and Winnipeg, and simply the passing of time were all factors that contributed to this decline. By the 1960s, most of the original settlers had died, and almost every family left for a bigger city. Some of those who moved chose to get buried in the cemetery, and so you see some gravestones from later dates, with the latest one from 2000. In 1964, the synagogue ceased to serve as a place of worship, and Edenbridge simply died as a colony, remembered only by those who lived here and the non-Jewish locals of the area. To conclude our visit, me and my friend wanted to experience what it was like to be inside the synagogue when it got dark. So we went back there and hung out for another hour, and talked about what it must have been like for the later generations of this place. היו 170 אנשים בשיא, נראה לי בשנות ה-20. אתה חושב שהבית כנסת הזה היה מכניס יותר מ-170?
אני חושב שהיה כאן צפוף בצורה נעימה. ממש, זה מרכז החיים. כאן אנשים באו בשביל להרגיש ביחד, בשביל להרגיש משמעות, בייחוד ברגעים הכי שחורים בהיסטוריה. הם ידעו שמאיפה שהם במקור הגיעו, הכחידו את כולם, ובגלל שההורים של ההורים שלהם היו הרפתקנים, הם נשארו בחיים. אם ההורים של ההורים שלהם לא היו הרפתקנים, אז הם היו, כן, עפר באירופה. במקום לחיות פה, לחיות בכבוד, כן, בקושי אבל בכבוד.
After the sun had set, the atmosphere inside was both eerie and magical. You really feel the ghostliness of this place. This is my third time in Edenbridge, and every time I'm here, we're the only people. It's like we have the place to ourselves, and it kind of shows how it's, technically it's a tourist site, but nobody knows about this place, and so hardly anybody comes. Like there's a guest book below, and you can see some visitors here and there, but really this place is abandoned. You can almost feel the ghostly kind of the presence of the settlers in a way. How they just left this building behind, just this synagogue standing in the middle of Saskatchewan. But at the same time, I find this building to be kind of a symbol of their success. Everything was against them, all odds were against them. They took a huge risk to come here from Lithuania, South Africa, warmer climates basically, to the bitter colds of the center of Canada, and without any know-how on how to farm. And they just took this huge risk and said, we're gonna figure it out, we're gonna learn. And they did, and they pushed through the difficulties, the bitter winters, the fact that they were at the end Jews, even the government, while allowing them to be here and, sold them this land, they didn't even allow them to name this place as they wished. So they couldn't fully express themselves either all the way. But at the same time, that was okay because, all they needed is their own land, something they couldn't have in Europe, and their own synagogue, their own shul, and their own community. I think this is a beautiful testimony to the success of these Jewish settlers and kind of to also the pioneer history of Canada, in this case, the Jewish pioneers of Canada, something that we could learn from, that despite difficulties of life and all the odds against us in realizing our dreams, really, if we put our mind to it, we could do whatever we want. We could self-realize and create the life that we want, just like they did.